to the Birth Boot Camp podcast. I'm Holly Hopley, the CEO.
I'm Cheryl Ameling, the certification coordinator.
And we have a very special guest today. We have Vanessa Stepan with us. She is actually a Birth Boot Camp instructor, and we are really excited to hear her birth stories today. And so you've had 3, right? You've got 3 of your own, and then she is pregnant with a surrogate baby, which is super exciting and awesome. So, will you just start out and tell us a little bit kind of about yourself and where you're from and any other fun, exciting things you want to tell us?
Yeah, well, thanks so much for having me. So I currently live in Colorado Springs. My husband is in the Air Force, so we are moving with the military every 3 years. So all three of my kids have been born in different states, which is really fun. But I'm originally from Massachusetts, and I started with Birth Boot Camp after my son was born. He was born in 2008, and I started teaching childbirth education in 2009 because I had taken a childbirth class, and it really made the whole difference for all my births. And so I'm really grateful to have that information and to be able to share that with other women.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I feel like a lot of times educators, that's how they start out. They have this great experience and they want to share it with everybody else. So awesome.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so let's kind of dive into your first birth. So like, what were your plans? Where were you planning to deliver? You said that you took a class, like kind of tell us kind of leading up to like preparation for your birth, and then tell us about your first birth experience.
Yeah. Okay. So we were newly married and found out I was pregnant. Super excited. I knew nothing about pregnancy or birth. Luckily, I had this amazing military spouse friend who was a doula, and she was like, Vanessa, you need to take a class. Like, you need to at least know your options, because I'm a planner, and I'm also like, I need information to not feel anxious about something. And so I want to know every option, every possibility, so I can have the best outcome possible. And I'd heard all these stories from friends and family of having traumatic births or having C-sections, and I really wanted to avoid that. And so I just started being like a student of pregnancy and birth, and I wanted to get my hands on everything, learn everything. And so I ended up taking a 10-week course with my husband. And that instructor, she ended up becoming a birth boot camp instructor, and that's how I found out about this amazing company. But that really made all the difference. It gave me the confidence of knowing like what to look for in each phase of labor, when to know I'm in labor. And, it just gave me that education that I really needed as a first-time mom, knowing nothing about pregnancy and birth. So fast forward, I'm 39 weeks and 6 days. And I wake up with some back pain, and I'm like, okay, like maybe this is something. And so I took a shower. I started having cramps, which I didn't know were contractions. I was like, these just feel like period cramps, but maybe something is happening. And so I told my husband, I was like, I don't know if these are contractions, but they might be. And so we labored at home for maybe 2 hours. And then I started showing signs of transition. I felt like I was going to throw up. I could barely stand. I had to really focus through each contraction. And so my husband's like packing all the stuff up, like, let's go to the hospital. I was like, no. Everyone says it's a marathon, not a sprint. Maybe I'm just being like, really like, I'm just not handling it well. And so we tried to like stay home a little bit longer. And then I was like, okay, maybe we should just go get checked and see where I'm at. And so we started driving to the hospital, and in between contractions, I was feeling fine. So I was like, maybe we should go to a park. And then we pull into the park, and I have another really strong contraction. I was like, I don't think this is a good idea. Let's go to the hospital. And so we arrive at the hospital, and they're like, oh, she's a first-time mom, like taking their time. And then they checked me, and I was at 8 centimeters, and they're like, okay, let's get rolling. And so he was born 45 minutes after I arrived to the hospital.
Wow.
And it was a very fast and furious, like I didn't have time to wrap my head around anything. Didn't
Mhm.
have time to really do many comfort measures. So it was amazing, but it was also like I had to process it afterwards because it happened so fast and I was
Mhm.
not expecting that.
Wow.
Um,
So how long was it from like start to finish?
I think like when I thought I was in labor, it was like around 6 a.m. and he was born around like 9:30 or 10.
Oh my
Wow.
goodness. I cannot believe
Wow.
that was that fast with your first.
Yeah, it
Wow.
is not the norm. I've never had
Right.
a doula client or a student have such a fast labor, so I feel like my raspberry leaf tea, I don't know. I swear it's the raspberry leaf tea that like gave me like superpowers and I just like spit babies out. But
That's
Wow.
amazing.
yeah, so that was my first birth story. And after that, I was like, wow, that was really incredible and not the norm. But,
Mhm.
every birth is so different, even
Yeah.
Yeah.
from, one birth to the next with the same mom.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yep.
Um,
That's so
so
interesting.
yeah.
Go ahead. Go ahead. What were you going to say?
Yeah, so he was born in North Dakota and there were very limited options for care. So I did have an obstetrician at a hospital for that birth. When I got pregnant with my daughter, I was living in Louisiana and they did have a couple home birth midwife options, but they were certified professional midwives, not nurse midwives, and or the hospital. There was no birth center, there was no midwife in a hospital or anything like that. So it was kind of like one extreme or the other. I decided to do co-care. So I had insurance covering my OB anyway. So I was like, okay, I found this amazing OB. And then I also was meeting with a home birth midwife and really hoping to have that home birth experience. But as I got further along in my pregnancy, my husband was deployed during that pregnancy. And I just felt more comfortable with my OB. My midwife had some personal stuff going on and wasn't quite available as much as I was hoping. And with my history of fast labors, I just felt more comfortable knowing that my doctor was going to be there and that I would have a place to land. Um, and so my daughter, unlike my son, decided to be a little bit stubborn. I always joke with her that she was just getting her hair ready and getting her bow on, even though she was born bald. Um, but she was my late baby. And by late, I mean, you can have babies 2 weeks before, 2 weeks after, like your due month is really what we should be calling it. But
Mhm.
with my son coming a day early, I was not expecting to have, a 41 week and 2 day birth.
Mhm.
Um, and so that was very challenging mentally to go not only just past my due date, but more than a week past my due date. And so I had a lot of pressure from doctors to, they were not pressuring me, but encouraging me to induce. And I really didn't want to induce. And so luckily, on 41 and 2, when I went into my appointment, I had started contracting that morning. And I had contractions the night before, but they fizzled out. And so that morning they became a little bit more consistent. And so I was like, I really hope this is it, because they were like putting the pressure on, like, we can't let you go much longer. And I went to the appointment and I was already at 6 centimeters. And they're like, okay,
Wow.
since your last birth went really fast, let's get you admitted. But I really loved her birth because I wasn't like this chaotic panic button when I got to my birthplace. It was, um, I got there before I felt like I needed to be there. And I had my doula and my photographer and I had my whole team arrive, and we had time to really like enjoy the labor, as opposed to my first one where I felt like it was just like chaotic when I got to the hospital and they found that I was that far along. They were like taking my blood and just
Mhm.
rushing through everything. And this one felt much more peaceful and controlled, which I really enjoyed. And it was still a pretty fast labor, but I think it was probably like an hour or two longer than my first birth.
Mhm.
Uh, but
Yeah.
still short.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I love that you said like you enjoyed it, because that's
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
what people think about labor because of like media and everything. Like everybody thinks of birth as like this awful, painful thing. And the fact that you can say that you enjoyed it, like I love that. I think more and more people need to hear that.
Yeah,
So,
I feel like I got to be present and I got to like recognize what stage of labor I was entering in. Like there's one part in my birth video where I'm like, I'm not getting any breaks. And like in my head as an educator, I knew like I was in transition. And then like I'm like, I feel like I have to poop, and I like knew I had to push, like, you know, all these things that like you know in your head as an educator, but then when you're in it, you still feel like the student. You're
yeah,
like, I have to poop. And then you're like, but you know it's not, it's the baby.
right.
So
Yeah.
it was just cool to be very like present in that birth. Whereas like Bradley's birth, I feel like I don't, it's just a whirlwind and I don't really remember the details.
Yeah. Well, and that's what I was going to say earlier is that I think it's interesting that moms like always in class, they're like, I just want a fast birth. I just want to get it over with.
Yeah.
And you don't really understand like what that comes with. like
Mhm.
the idea, like you're packing so much work into a shorter amount of time. And often it is harder to wrap your mind around what's happening to your body. And so I think it's interesting that you got those two, typically the opposite way that people usually do it. First one's usually long, second one's usually quicker, but that you had that contrast of like that one was so fast and rushed, and I felt, you know, like you did you feel like it happened to you, whereas the second one you felt you were an
Yeah.
active participant?
Yeah. And then also being a first time mom, just like not completely knowing what to expect.
Right.
Um, it just felt like, oh my gosh, like I just did this and I don't even know what happened.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. And
But
so it can be beneficial to have kind of that a little bit longer labor where you can kind of identify this is where I am, and you get to kind of enjoy that early labor, and you get to move into that active labor where you do the comfort measures, and like it can be helpful because it gives your mind time to know what's happening to your body and to be a participant
yeah,
in it. It's a different experience.
exactly.
Yeah.
But so you said your husband was deployed, but was he at the birth at all, or was he still
Yes.
deployed?
So he actually got deployed before I took a test and
Okay.
found out I was pregnant.
Uh-huh.
We were hoping to get pregnant before he left. And it's funny because I actually took a pregnancy test before he left and it was negative, and I was so crushed because I was like, I'm gonna have to wait like 5 or 6 months before we try again. And then he had gotten to where he was deployed, and I took another test because my period was a couple days late and it was positive. And so it was a really big surprise and blessing. And then I was like, oh my gosh, I have a 2-year-old and I'm pregnant and my husband's gone. So
Yeah.
it was a lot, but he ended up, the Air Force was really amazing and he was able to come home a little bit early. So I think he got home around like 33 or 34 weeks of pregnancy.
Awesome.
Good.
That's
Good.
cool.
Do you feel like there was anything emotionally, because Bradley was like on time early-ish, and then Arlen was a week plus later. Do you feel like there was
Yeah.
anything emotionally that was hanging you up, or some babies
I
cook
think,
longer than others?
yeah, well, I think there was a lot of factors. First of all, obviously my husband being deployed for most of the pregnancy, and then having a child, like another child, and having to worry about who's going to watch this baby when I go into labor. So my mom had come out, I think like a week or two before my due date, and she was planning to leave like 5 days after the due date because we assumed baby would come when the other one came. And so she had to like rebook her flight to stay longer. And so I just felt like a lot of pressure to like go into labor. And then also like that lost dream of having that home birth and still being in the hospital, I think probably played a little bit. But I also think like her positioning was off. And I think that night before when I was having some contractions, I could feel her like move. So, I mean, she was always head down, but she might have been like sideways or just in a
Yep.
funky position. And so when she finally got into that position and I, allowed myself mentally to just let go and be ready, I think that's what really did it. Because I tried
Yeah.
all the witchcraft.
Right. All the things.
I was doing all the things and nothing was working.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting, the mind body connection, and
For sure.
and position plays a lot into it too. And then when it all comes together, your body's
Mhm.
like, okay, let's do this. This sounds great.
Mhm.
Yeah.
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 Okay. So did you have a doula with Bradley with your first?
So with Bradley, I did not hire a doula, but my instructor at the time was getting her doula certification, and she was like,
Mhm.
if you want me there, just call me. But I literally didn't have time
It
to
was
call
so fast.
anyone.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
I'm like, it worked out fine. But yes, I would never birth without a doula now. Like I
Mhm.
have had a doula for my daughter, my son, and I will have a doula for my surrogate birth as well. So
Mhm.
for
Yeah.
sure, it's a non-negotiable for me.
Right. So with your second birth, what are things that your doula did that were really helpful to you?
She did a lot of counter pressure. I really like the hands-on. I'm not someone that like I don't need to be talked to through things. Like I'm very, I don't know, I'm an Enneagram 3, if that makes any sense. So I'm like very like efficient and like I can do it myself. I'll get it done. So I don't need someone to like tell me I'm doing amazing and I'm beautiful and whatever. Like I don't need
Mhm.
that. I need like when I'm having a contraction, I need all hands on deck. And so she was really good at like kind of massaging between contractions and giving that counter pressure during contractions.
Mhm. Yeah, that makes sense. Yep. Awesome.
I love that.
Okay. Well, do you want to tell us about your third birth?
Yes, my third and favorite birth. So we were about to move to Colorado and I found out that I was pregnant, so with a surprise bonus baby. And so I was like, oh my gosh, we're moving and we're building this new home that we only, accommodated or we only accounted for having 2 kids. So there was just like a lot going on, but I was really excited to move to a state that is so birth friendly. So my son was born in North Dakota, my daughter was born in Louisiana, and my most recent son was born here in Colorado Springs. And so when I got here and I was like, oh my gosh, they have this amazing birth center and they have home birth midwives that are certified nurse midwives. I was just really excited. So I actually went to the birth center first and I loved them so much. And I love the birth center. But because of my fast labors and because I wanted my kids to really be a part of the birth, I was like, I think it'll just be easier to just be at home and like not have to
Mhm.
worry about like a childcare person. Because the birth center is like, yeah, you can bring your kids, but you have to have a designated
Mhm.
babysitter basically for them. And I was like, oh, my labors go fast and I already have to worry about getting my doula and the photographer there. Like, let's just
Mhm.
stay home. They can watch a movie or whatever. Um, and so I was so excited to plan a home birth, and I had a really great pregnancy. And it was actually the night before his due date. My husband and I were trying to get some oxytocin flowing, and it worked. And like 2 hours later, I started having cramps. And it was interesting because, like, you'd think a third time I would, and as an instructor, like, I would know when I'm in labor. But, like, I still am never convinced I'm in labor until I hit transition.
Mhm.
Like,
Yep.
I
Oh, I
just
did the
don't,
same thing. Yep.
I think I'm just like in denial. So, anyways, it was like midnight or 1 o'clock, and I was having cramps. But I remember with my other labors, like when I would have cramps or contractions, my whole belly would just get rock hard. And with these contractions, it wasn't doing that. So I was like, it must not be a contraction. So I was not
Interesting.
convinced. And I didn't wake up my husband until I think around 2. But I like couldn't, I tried to sleep and I just like couldn't sleep. I was resting, but I couldn't fall asleep. And then I woke him up and he's like, are you sure? And he like kind of like annoyed at me that I was like, because I've never gone into labor in the middle of the night. I've always woken up in labor.
Mhm.
And so I was like, yeah, like I'm really uncomfortable and I can't, sleep through these.
Mhm.
And so we called my birth team and let them know that I thought I might be in labor. And my doula was like, okay, well, I'll let my husband know to get childcare ready for tomorrow. And I was like, oh, well, I mean, I'm never convinced I'm that far along. So I was like, well, maybe, but based on my track record, I probably need you here sooner than tomorrow.
Yeah.
And so by the time my team got there and they checked me, I was already at a 10.
Yeah.
And so I was kind of bummed that I didn't alert my team sooner, because I kind of, went through transition without a doula or anyone. So it would have been awesome to have support a little bit earlier. So fourth time, I'm gonna have support there right away. But it was amazing, and I dilate really quick, but I don't push really quick. So I did get a lot of use out of my doula for like the pushing phase. And I got to have a water birth, which was really amazing. And I was like, I'm never gonna birth on dry land again. But with the surrogate baby, I'm gonna be birthing on dry land. So a little bit sad about that, but
Yep.
yeah, it was just really amazing to have that weightless feeling in the tub and the warmth, and just being able to get into different positions and be so comfortable was really awesome. And also, like, my doula had, a rebozo that I was pulling against when I was pushing, which was really helpful. And yeah, he was born around like 5:30 in the morning. So I think, yeah, so like I would say I was probably starting active labor around like 2 in the morning, and then he was born at like 5:30. So
it's quick. You go quick.
Awesome. Yeah. It's like you said, you're just efficient. Your body's just really efficient.
My body is an Enneagram 3 as well.
Yeah.
So how long do you typically push? You said you take longer to push.
So I pushed for about 2 hours. They got there around 3:30, and I was completely dilated, and he wasn't born until 5:30.
Okay. Wow. So even that long with a third baby.
Yeah. So I know, like, don't ever tell students you don't like pushing, but I don't love pushing. And so, but I think it's kind of worked in my favor to like slowly just breathe my babies out. And so I really don't actively push until they're crowning, and not because like I don't want to, but I just feel like I can't. So I just let my body like push that baby out, and I've never torn. So I'm like, maybe it's good to push really slow and not actively push with your body. I say that, and I'm sure I was pushing with the contractions, but I wasn't like full force.
Just like
pushing.
Your body was just like doing it on its own.
I was letting my body take the lead, and then, obviously I wasn't fighting against it, but I wasn't probably giving it the extra force I could have been.
Yeah.
Gotcha. That's interesting. So do you have any, like, as you look back over your 3 births, do you have any like favorite moments or like special moments with you and your husband, or you and your doula, or like that aha, I did it moment, or like things that you look back and you're specifically like, that I liked that moment, or that was really special, or that was really powerful?
I think like my home birth was so special because like I look back at like video and photos, and like my kids, like how loving they were to me. Like one of my favorite pictures is like I'm leaning against the side of the tub, and my son is like rubbing my back, and they were just like, honestly, they were like my little mini doulas, and they were so amazing. And that's just like a special memory I'll never forget, is like having them there with me. And then also with my third, that was the only one we didn't find out the gender.
Okay.
And so that was a really special
fun.
moment when he was born, and my oldest son got to announce if it was a boy or a girl. So that was like a memory I'll never forget.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
Did you do anything to like prepare your kids for being at the birth?
Yeah. I mean, obviously they have been exposed to birthy things forever. I started teaching when Bradley was a baby. So they've seen like a lot of birth videos, but we watched some birth videos leading up to it. We bought a home birth book. They helped me gather all the supplies, and they came to some of the midwife appointments, and the midwives even let them like use the little Doppler to find the heartbeat. And so they were really involved. And it was nice because we do have quite a large age gap between the 2 older ones and the baby. So my son was almost 7 and my daughter was almost 5 when he was born. So they were at really amazing ages to really like understand. I think it could be a little more challenging with like a 2 or 3-year-old.
Yeah.
Mhm.
but they were old enough to really like be excited and be a part of it. And the only time that they got scared was after the birth. They're like, there's so much blood, in the pool, it
Mhm.
looks worse than it is.
Hmm.
Um, but the midwives reassured them that it was fine and normal. And
Hmm.
so they did really well.
That's awesome.
I love that.
I think if more kids saw like their siblings be born and were a part of that, I'm like, I think that would just like, I don't know, make a huge difference like with families and like the sibling bonding. And like, I just think
Yeah.
that's so cool. But so many people are afraid for their kids to be at their births. So I love that.
Mhm.
That's just, they're going to remember that for the rest of their life too. They're going to remember how
Yeah.
special that was.
My daughter still asks to read like the home birth book. She
Hmm.
loves it, and she thought it was the coolest thing. And to be able to
Mhm.
hold the baby, like when the placenta was still attached, like they were able to like see and touch and be there.
Yeah.
And typically if you're in a hospital, like the kids will come 2 hours later, and there's just this magical baby that appeared. And so
Right.
I think it was really cool to see like the hard work and the process of like how a baby comes in this world. So
Yeah.
Hmm. Hmm.
Well, and I think, like the fact that they did bring you comfort. I think
Mhm.
like for me, I I didn't think that I could act and do and sound and be the way I needed to be with my kids there. So it was more of the like magical showing up of the baby. Um, but I love that you like you found comfort in them being there and you could still labor the way you needed to and like that bond that you guys will have always because of that. Like I think that's really beautiful. I love it.
Yeah, I was a little bit nervous that they wouldn't be that great. Like,
Mm-hmm.
they're wild and crazy, but it's especially my son, he's so in tune with how I'm feeling. And like if I am sick or if I have a headache, like he is my kid that just will come and cuddle me and like bring
Mm-hmm.
a blanket or bring a snack. Like he's just very loving and caring in that way. And so
Yeah.
it was really cool to see that in action. And I'm sure
Hmm.
behind the scenes, like they probably were doing things that were like they were getting in trouble for, but as far as my memory goes, they were perfect little angels and it was
Of
beautiful.
course. Of
That's
course.
awesome.
I love it. So great.
That's exciting. Um, I'm just curious what your plans are with your surrogate baby now. Kind of
Yeah, me
what you're
too.
planning to do with that. And I mean,
Yeah, so I had agreed originally that I would birth at a hospital. Because I had birthed my first two in hospitals and it was fine. I go into spontaneous labor, I have fast labors, no one bothers me. It's great.
mhm,
I did not realize that being an IVF pregnancy, there would be, I think it depends on the doctor, but all the doctors here in Colorado Springs consider IVF high risk. And for that, they want to induce at 39 weeks. And there's all sorts of, they do more screening and more testing and more ultrasounds and all the things that we know as childbirth educators can lead to unnecessary interventions. And so for me, that's been a challenge. And I did try to switch to midwifery care at the birth center. The parents were open to it. We visited the birth center, and then they decided ultimately that they felt more comfortable at the hospital. And so I have to be respectful since it is not my baby.
right.
Um, and they're first time parents, and they only know what they know. And I signed a contract saying I would deliver at a hospital. So like I'm really my hands
Mhm,
are tied. So I am hopeful that it'll still be a good experience, but I am trying to be mentally prepared for anything because an induction is probably likely unless I'm praying that I just go into labor the 39th week. We don't
mhm,
have to worry about induction,
yeah,
but it'll be a different experience. And the way I'm trying to wrap my head around it is that, as a childbirth educator, maybe that would be a good experience for me to go through an induction and be able to speak to that because I've only experienced spontaneous labor. So that's what I like, know, and trust. But
yeah,
I have confidence that, my body knows what it's doing. And as long as I'm favorable, that it will go smoothly. That's what I'm,
mhm, yeah, yep.
but I
And
do
you have
have
a
a doula.
doula, yeah.
Yep. I do have a doula who will be there to support and, yeah, I'm so excited for the parents to meet their baby. And it's been something that's kind of been on my bucket list since my first child was born. I had a friend who was born without a uterus and ended up adopting and then having one through surrogacy. And I just always thought like, wow, that's a gift that I could give. I've had really smooth, easy pregnancies and obviously fast, uncomplicated deliveries. When my family's complete, like I would love to be able to help a family. So that's just on my heart for a long time. And I'm so excited to be able to fulfill that dream for that family. So they're really wonderful.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's amazing.
We'll have to do another podcast after
I was just about to
birth.
say, I was like, we'll have to get on here again and you'll have to tell us about that birth. So, well, that's exciting. We will, keep you in our thoughts and just like keep our fingers crossed that, you won't have to do an induction, or if you do that, it just goes like super smooth too. So
Yeah.
I'm excited for you for that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you'll have to keep us posted.
I will.
Awesome. Well, thanks for hopping on. I really wanted to hear your home birth story too, because last time we like got together physically, you were pregnant. And so, yep. Well, that's awesome. Do you want to share where people can like find you on social media or your website or anything if people want to kind of follow along with your surrogacy and stuff?
Yeah, sure. So my personal Instagram, which I share a lot of my surrogacy journey on, is Top Not Nessa. And then I have my birth account, which is Birthwell CO Springs. And you can also find me on birthwellcosprings.com is my website for my birth stuff.
Okay. Well, we'll make sure we put links to it as well.
Awesome.
Okay. Yeah. Well, thank you so much. This was so fun.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
Yeah. All right, everybody, make sure that you subscribe and stay tuned for more awesome birth stories next week.